What is the secret to painting very detailed grass? Layering and patience. Yes, layering and patience. Why? Well, that's simple. To begin, it's always good to block out the color, which includes where the grass would be. That will pretty much come down to different tones of greens, both light and dark. After that, a stage of wet on wet. That way you could apply brush strokes and build blades of grass, and then ultimately dry brush. That way you can create a layer where you could build on top of it. And of course the last stage would be wet on dry. I mean, how else are you gonna get sharp details without muddying the paint? Oh yeah, I forgot to elaborate on the last part. Patience. Hello and welcome. My name is Charlembos. I go by Bob, and I'm not your typical painter. And in today's video, I am going to demonstrate on how I created the grass in this painting. This is not just any type of grass. Not that it's special, but the important thing is that it is very close to the viewer. Therefore, it's going to require a lot of attention. There actually is a second patch of grass over here. It's a similar process to do, but it doesn't involve that much detail. And it is far in the distance after all. One thing that I do want to point out is before I even started painting the grass, there was an entire background to paint. That includes the tree, the tiles behind, but one of the most complex things was the tree grate. It practically had some openings where the grass would come out of. And besides just the grass, there was also fallen leaves. If you notice, there are some right here behind the grass blades, and there's even a few clusters in the tree grate openings. What I'm trying to say is I couldn't just jump right into painting the grass. I had to prepare for it by painting the background and everything that's behind it. Let's get started with our demonstration by doing the layer that involved mostly wet on wet. As mentioned, before I even paint the grass, I have to depict the tree grate first. I'm not going to go into too much detail on it, but instead paint the openings, at least the ones that are visible. The grass definitely has taken over, and for the most part the openings are barely visible, but they are there and I have to paint them first. I just paint some simple lines, that way I know where they are. Some of the metal will definitely be visible in the end, and I also have to paint the illusion of grass grown out of the openings. The thing I'm mostly paying attention to are the edges of the grate. It's not made of a shiny metal, but I definitely want to use lights and darks to shape it out, especially the edges and corners, not just on the sides, but the openings too. When applying the lights and darks, I'm paying attention to the sunlight, especially for some of the highlights that are visible. These openings are not just a pattern, they have some depth. That is why I am applying a dark tone more towards the top left of the openings and not the bottom right. Besides the very distinctive highlight that's on the left side of the crate, I am carefully also applying a very thin line of a light tone around the edges of the openings too. Again, the goal is to show that these openings have depth. Besides the tree grate, there's also some fallen leaves. I am not detailing them too much, but instead by painting an impression that they are there. I'm just using tones of orange, both light and dark, to paint them, mostly on the muted side. But an important thing is to give them a casted shadow, especially since they occupy space, and also so they don't appear that they are floating in mid-air. Besides the clusters of leaves that are stuck in the openings of the grate, I took the time to paint some of the stray leaves in the surrounding area. After all, I did just mix some colors. I might as well use them in other areas where I see the same colors, and that happened to be some more fallen leaves. Anyhow, let's get back to the subject, the grass. After establishing the tree grate and some of the fallen leaves, I begin to start painting some grass blades, particularly the ones that are sprouting through the openings of the tree grate. I am trying to follow the photo a little closely, but in the end, I'm really using it just as a reference. The goal right now is just to lay out some blades of grass. This is just the first layer, and during this time, I'm going to try to take advantage of the paint being wet still. I am being mindful of the tree grate and its pattern. Some of the grass will definitely cover it, but there will definitely be parts of it that will be exposed. Therefore, I will touch it up here and there. Same goes also for some of the fallen leaves. The grass will definitely cover some of them, but I definitely will go back to a few that are still visible and touch them up. Let's go back to talking about the grass again. Right now, I'm trying to lay out lines of color that will resemble grass. I'm definitely here and there looking at the photo for reference, especially to capture a variety of different types of blades. They don't all go straight up. If anything, I don't think many are even a straight line, but they definitely protrude out of the openings of the tree grate and lean a bit to the side. As for color, I am trying to stick to the mid-tones, so I'm not going to go too bright or too dark, at least not just yet. But something I'm doing while laying out the color is using a dry brush. The goal is to gently blur what I have established. It might seem counterproductive right now, but this is very important for layering. I will definitely build on top of this later, both while the paint is still wet and a lot later when the paint is dry. And since this section is very close to the viewer, I'm definitely going to try to detail some individual grass blades, especially the very tall ones that go past the grate. Some are even overlapping other sections of the painting, such as the tiles on the ground and the front wheel of the moped. And lastly, something that's not too visible, is that these grass blades do cast shadows. Anyways, let's move to a different section now. This area here is the tree trunk. As you can see, during the underpainting process, I blocked out the area with two distinguishable colors. One is a very bright green, and the other is a very dark one. This is more as a guide to distinguish which section has the very bright grass and which side is in the shade. But that does not mean that there won't be some bright blades that will cross over to the dark side, or that I won't apply any dark tones in the bright area, but it will definitely help me with the layering, especially with the dark tones in the back, since some grass blades will barely be visible. Anyhow, for this section, there's definitely more of a process involved, which is to work from the back all the way to the front. And no, this is not something you want to follow 100%, but it definitely will help you in the early stages of building the layers of grass. Since it's pretty much concrete behind the tree, I have to paint the grass blades in the back very carefully, especially the ones that stand out and are very tall. That is why you will see me right now making sure I detail some. Once again, I'm following the reference photo very carefully to depict a few grass blades that stand out. I'm using mostly neutral greens, some on the cooler side, but I definitely did use some warmer tones of green for a few blades. I tried to look at the photo carefully here and there to mimic the different temperatures of green. Anyhow, just like the grass before, the process is similar in some ways. It's pretty much building line after line of different colors, but the goal is to make these blades appear as if they are emerging from the darkness. And because of that, I'm also using a dark tone to repaint the area I blocked out. That way I can later dry brush the area and soften the edges of some of the grass blades in the shade, further pushing them more into the back and making them appear as if they're emerging from the dark. But not every grass blade back there is dark. Some are actually being hit by direct sunlight, so I am using some brighter tones of green in order to make sure that they stand out more, especially the ones that are in front of the concrete. Besides being brighter, I'm actually going to use multiple colors to depict them. Why? They are not exactly straight lines. A few of them are even bent in several locations, so because of that, the light will hit each section differently. Besides, the grass blades are close to the viewer, so you can't just depend on depicting them with just one color. They will involve a little more detail than that, especially compared to the ones that are shrouded in the shade. And I definitely looked at the photo carefully to capture a variety of different shapes and sizes. All this will add to the illusion of believable grass. Only fake turf has grass blades that look all alike. I want to point out that not everything that I'm depicting is actually grass. I am not a plant expert. I do remember a while back being corrected by a viewer on how to spell petals for flowers. The joke was that petals belong on bikes, and my reply was that I knew more about bikes than plants. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, even though I don't know much about the plants that are in the picture, I am definitely looking very carefully at the photo to depict them as accurately as possible. That's why I'm depicting a few clusters of leaves that stand out from the ground, and other nuances such as dots of color. If I see them, I try to depict them. I'm spending a lot of time doing these individual grass blades for a particular reason. In a way, it is part of creating an illusion of lots of grass. Obviously, I'm not going to paint every blade, or leaf for that matter, but painting key grass blades will help establish that the other ones that are just brush strokes of lines and colors are grass as well, even if they are lacking detail or hiding in the shade. It is all about the ones that are detailed, that stand out, that will help create the illusion that everything is grass. Now let's talk about the ones that are in the shade. I'm definitely not going to paint them as carefully as the ones that stand out. If anything, I want them to be suppressed a bit, because there are some grass blades that are more brighter in the sunlight that are in front of them, but they are necessary to build for the purpose of layering. I did use the photo as reference, but not really to copy each blade, but instead to mimic a pattern that matches the photo a bit. As for the color, I'm using several different tones of green, one that even borderlines black. In ways, I am applying color the way I see it in the photo. I'm not just painting lines for the grass blades, but I'm also painting in between them too, especially with the goal to amplify the darks, to make them even more dark, and to further enhance the illusion that the grass is sticking out from the ground. What I'm building here is definitely not going to be permanent. Later, I will definitely go back. So in a way, right now, I'm just building the foundation of the grass in the shade. I'm definitely working wet on wet here, because after I establish all the brush strokes and lines, I will dry brush this section, especially since things in the shade should not be that sharp. Now that I feel comfortable that I established the grass in the back, it is time to paint the ones that are in the front. Instead of being in the shade, these particular grass blades are actually going to be in the sunlight. Another obstacle that I will encounter is definitely the tree. As you can see, I did not really paint the bottom part of the trunk, but I definitely will touch it up as I paint the grass blades, especially since some will be directly in front of it. And also, just because I feel comfortable with the grass blades I established in the back, that doesn't mean I'm not going to go back into them. Since I mixed a bunch of bright tones of green, I could apply them to some of the blades that stick out in the sunlight. But for the most part right now, I will definitely focus on the ones in the front. And yes, I do know I simplified the grass as being some in the front and some in the back. But surprise, surprise, there are some in the middle too. And they're not going to be as bright as the ones in the front. At least the ones that are not being hit by the sun, that is. But for sure, they're going to stand out a little more than the ones in the back. If not by color, they will be a little bit sharper with harder edges. The paint for the most part is still a little bit wet, so at this stage, some of the colors will definitely get muddy, and you will see that definitely with my brush strokes. But I'm not worried. This is all part of the layer building process. The important thing is that I will establish where the grass blades are, and then later go back and touch them up. But before we continue, let's go back to some of the little patches of grass that I did earlier. The paint is in a way semi-dry right now, so now it is a good opportunity to add some touch-ups. Besides painting just some highlights and more line work to mimic the grass, I'm trying to depict some of the shadows that the grass blades are casting. Yes, grass can cast shadows. Lucky for me, it's only these little patches here that have shadows in my painting. While at it, I'm also touching up some of the leaves, both the ones on the concrete and the ones that are stuck in the tree grate. I'm not doing anything major, but instead building on the impression that there's leaves there. It only takes various different brushstrokes of various shades of orange to mimic in a way fallen leaves. I'm also painting some highlights on key locations of certain leaves and using some dark tones to make them look like they're emerging out of the tree grate. If anything, my focus right now is more on everything but the grass. Speaking of the tree grate, I am touching it up as well. Not only because I'm painting some shadows on it, but I'm also enhancing some of the highlights by using more dark and light tones, more on the higher contrast that is, especially around the edges and the openings as well. Now after establishing more of the backdrop, it is time to spend some time on the actual grass blades. I'm still applying different brushstrokes of lines to mimic grass, but the difference is the tone of the color. At this point, I'm going a little bit more on the darker side, as well also brighter. I'm still dry brushing here and there, especially with the intent that I will paint more grass blades later. Like mentioned before, it's all about the layering. I'm also following the same process with the grass more towards the right that I used earlier, which is working from the back to the front. And again, I'm taking advantage of the paint being wet right now, so I could get those softer edges. That way the grass that I paint right now looks blurry. This will help create a nice illusion of depth, especially when I paint the grass blades in front a lot sharper. And while painting grass, you are bound to make a mistake here and there. Luckily, there are many ways to fix mistakes. Sometimes it's as simple as using a neighboring color to reshape what you painted. The color might get muddy, but this will set you up to correct it later when the paint dries. And just by chance, if you paint some grass on top of a dry area, you could just carefully wipe it off and start again. Another tip I want to mention is that instead of painting grass blades, paint the negative space between them instead. The goal is to work as much as possible with wet paint, particularly during the early stages of building your layers of grass. You can always go back into the negative space and add a few blades here and there, especially if you want to get a nice soft touch for the grass that's hidden within the grass, because just blocking out colors in the beginning has its limitations, especially if the section dries. Plus during that stage, the way you apply paint is more on the vague side, unless you did a nice detailed drawing first. To sum up the early stages of painting grass, block out your colors, particularly midtones, and then build your grass blades line by line. Ideally working from the back to the front, and then dry brush. Possibly add more lines of grass, dry brush a little more, and don't forget to detail a few, especially the ones that stand out or are very close to the viewer. It's a repetitive process, but necessary, especially if you're trying to get the illusion of grass. Now that the paint is dry, let's get to the final layer, which is pretty much wet on dry. Now that the layer of paint is dry, it is time to do some touch-ups. And this is a very important stage when building your grass. Because the layer is no longer wet, you can take advantage of sharper lines. Plus, when you paint over a section, you don't have to worry about the colors becoming muddy. And this is definitely very important for highlights. At this stage, detail is everything, and at some points, you really have to take it slow. In a way, I scrutinize each grass blade that I painted, and I tried to enhance particular ones, whether it was to sharpen them, add highlights, or a little more detail. I didn't just focus on the grass blades that stood out. I also paid attention to the ones that stood out in a bad way too. To summarize my approach, it's all about scrutinizing what you did and figuring out how to improve it. And definitely one section that did need a lot of work is in front of the tree, especially since it got really muddy from the paint being wet. Something not that noticeable is the introduction of very dark blue tones. More specifically, Indian Throne Blue. It's very translucent, but also very dark. I mixed it with my dark tone in order to cool down the dark shaded areas. The blue also will help make the grass pop too, especially since the greens have warm tones. I'm pretty much using warm tone colors that are bright against cool tones that are very dark. This will definitely help with the illusion of depth, especially for the grass blades that are going to be in the front. Now before we move into the bulk of the grass, let's pay one last visit to the tiny patches of grass that are sprouting out of the openings. I'm not going to spend too much more time here, but I am going to take advantage of the paint being dry. Since the colors will not get muddied now, I can apply those bright tones and highlights with ease, and in the process, defining the grass blades even more. I'm also applying dark tones in order to boost the contrast, but more so towards the bottom of the patches of grass in order to give them a more grounded appearance. Now time to fix the biggest eyesore in my patch of grass. My goal for this section was to make sure each blade of grass stood out, and in order to do that, I used my dark tone that had Indian Throne Blue in it, and I tried to apply it between the grass blades. I also used it to outline currently existing ones too, particularly the ones that were in direct sunlight. I would do this very carefully and try to maintain hard edges between the light and dark tones. But as for the parts of the grass that were more in the shade, I would in some scenarios apply my dark blue tone and repaint that area. The goal is for soft blurry edges and in ways create depth and make it appear that the grass blades are emerging from the shade. Anyways, let's wrap up this demonstration. Towards the end, you really have to scrutinize all the grass that you painted, especially the ones that stand out in the front. But if I have to say one last important thing about building grass, it is to be very patient, especially since it requires, at least in my opinion, multiple layers. The easiest for sure is blocking out the color in the beginning. That way you have a foundation to work with. After that, depending on how complex your grass is, you might have to paint multiple stages of layers. One stage that's not shown in this video is the tree trunk. I did it way before the grass because it was necessary, especially since a lot of grass blades are going to be in front of it. That's why painting grass is a process that involves lots of layers, and in ways you have to be strategic about it. But during the process, it's very ideal that you take advantage of the stages of the paint being wet, particularly in the beginning, and also dry for the end. If you made it to the end, thanks for watching. I truly appreciate it, and I hope you found this video helpful when it comes to trying to paint grass up close. This by chance happens to be one of my most complex paintings I've done. It involved a lot of detail, not just the grass, but there's a moped too, and some buildings, and some trees, and even another moped all the way in the back. Anyhow, I'm almost done, and soon I will post a time-lapse video on how I did it from beginning to end. For more of my work, check out my Instagram. Not your typical painter, of course. And I even have an Etsy shop too. The links will be in the description. Anyways, until next time, bye for now.